They laughed at her choice. They warned her she was throwing her life away. She married a poor farmer with nothing to offer but calloused hands and quiet eyes. What she didn't know was that her marriage would uncover a truth powerful enough to silence an entire town. In Abeni's village, life was measured by outcomes: who married well, who struggled, who escaped poverty, and who became a warning. From childhood, the rule was taught without mercy: marry well or suffer forever. It was not spoken with cruelty. It was spoken with fear. Women were reminded of it in kitchens, at water wells, in quiet conversations meant to protect them. Mothers passed it down the way one passed down survival knowledge, because they believed it was the only shield the world offered. Abeni had heard it all her life. And yet, something inside her had always resisted it. Not loudly, not rebelliously, but firmly. Abeni was beautiful in a way that drew attention without asking for it. She did not dress to be noticed. She did not speak to impress. But when she entered a space, people felt it. Her presence carried a calm confidence that made others pause, as if the air itself had shifted. Men noticed her early. Traders who traveled between towns lingered longer than necessary when she passed. Business owners found excuses to speak to her parents. Even a local politician, older and well-established, sent emissaries carrying gifts and promises. Land, security, status. To the village, her future seemed obvious. Her mother reminded her daily. "Comfort is not a small thing," she said while grinding spices or folding laundry. "Love does not fill empty stomachs." Her friends teased her gently at first. "You'll live in a big house. You'll never fetch water again." Later the teasing sharpened. "Don't be foolish. Don't waste your chance." Abeni listened, but she did not rush. Because when she imagined those futures, large houses, heavy jewelry, borrowed power, her chest felt tight. Not afraid. Just empty. What she wanted was something quieter. That was why she noticed him. Kola. He did not arrive at the market with noise or confidence meant for display. He came early before the crowd thickened, while the air was still cool and the day still hopeful. He arranged his produce carefully, hands moving with the familiarity of someone who respected his work. His clothes were always clean, but worn thin from years of honest labor. His hands were rough, marked by soil and seasons. His eyes held a stillness that suggested patience, not resignation but acceptance. He never raised his voice to bargain, never boasted about harvests, never competed for attention. When others joked about him being just a farmer, he smiled and kept working. When customers haggled unfairly, he adjusted his prices without resentment. He did not shrink. He did not perform. He simply existed. And that, to Abeni, was rare. She found herself watching him without realizing it. Not with curiosity fueled by desire, but with something deeper, recognition. As if her spirit had found a familiar rhythm in his presence. Then came the rain. It arrived suddenly, the way village storms often did, without warning, without mercy. People scrambled. Vendors rushed to cover their goods. Voices rose. Feet splashed through mud. Abeni's basket snapped under the weight of movement and panic. Fruit spilled onto the wet ground, rolling into puddles. For a moment she froze. Not because of the loss, but because she felt exposed. Before anyone else reacted, Kola was already kneeling beside her. He gathered the fruits gently, wiping mud away with the edge of his shirt, handing them back one by one. No jokes, no commentary, no attempt to impress her or the watching crowd. Just quiet assistance. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded, meeting her eyes briefly. In that glance there was no hunger, no expectation, no calculation, just respect. As the rain slowed and people resumed their noise, Abeni stood there longer than necessary, her heart oddly still. Something had settled. Not excitement, not fantasy, not rebellion, certainty. For the first time she understood something clearly. She did not want a life built on fear of suffering. She wanted a life built on dignity. And though she did not yet know his name or his story, or where this path would lead, in that moment, Abeni knew one thing with absolute clarity. Her choice would be different. When Abeni announced she would marry Kola, the village did not react with surprise. It reacted with alarm. The news moved fast, faster than truth ever did. By sunset, it had already been reshaped into ridicule, outrage, and disbelief. People gathered in clusters, voices rising and falling like waves of judgment. Has she lost her senses? Of all the men, a farmer. An aunt confronted her openly in the courtyard, arms crossed, voice sharp with embarrassment. Are you blind? She demanded. You had options. Real options. Another woman laughed, not kindly. He doesn't even own land worth mentioning. Her friends tried a softer approach at first. You're romanticizing poverty, one whispered. Love doesn't fix leaking roofs, another warned. But when Abeni remained calm, when she did not argue, cry, or reconsider, the softness vanished. You'll regret this, they said with certainty. You're throwing your life away. The harshest rejection came from her father. He did not shout. He did not insult her. He simply turned his face away. I will not sit and watch my daughter choose struggle, he said quietly. If you walk this path, you walk it without me. Those words cut deeper than anger ever could. Kola stood beside her through it all. He did not defend himself. He did not plead. He did not promise riches he did not have. He watched as her world turned against her because of him. And when they were alone, he said only one thing. If you change your mind, he told her gently, I will understand. There was no bitterness in his voice. No wounded pride. Just honesty. Abeni looked at him then, really looked. Not at his clothes. Not at his possessions. At the way he gave her freedom even when it cost him everything. I won't, she said. And she didn't. They married quietly. No drums. No grand feast. No procession through the village. Just a simple ceremony beneath a wide sky. 2 witnesses, and vows spoken without trembling. Abeni wore a modest dress. Kola stood tall in clean, carefully pressed clothes. There were no speeches about wealth or future promises, only commitment spoken plainly. Some villagers watched from a distance, shaking their heads. Others didn't come at all. Abeni did not look back. She moved into Kola's farmhouse the same evening. It sat at the edge of the fields, humble and weather-worn. The walls were cracked from years of sun and rain. The roof leaked when storms were heavy. The furniture bore the scars of time, repaired, reinforced, never replaced. Life there was not gentle. Water had to be fetched before sunrise. Meals were simple, sometimes repetitive. Some nights passed without conversation, not from distance, but from exhaustion. The silence was real. So was the work. But something else was real too. Respect. Kola never raised his voice. Never questioned her worth. Never reminded her of what he provided or lacked. When she spoke, he listened. When she disagreed, he considered it. When she struggled, he stood beside her without judgment. There was no ownership in his love. No control. No demand for gratitude. At night, when the fields rested and the world grew quiet, Abeni lay beside a man who never made her feel small. And for the first time in her life, she slept deeply. Still, there were things she noticed. Strange things. Kola sometimes left before dawn and returned later than expected, cleaner than a farmer should be after fieldwork. He received letters he never opened in front of her. Visitors came occasionally, well-dressed men who spoke to him with unusual respect, and left without ever entering the house. Once, she overheard someone address him with a title before quickly correcting themselves. Kola noticed her confusion, but he said nothing. And Abeni did not ask. Not yet, because she had chosen this life with open eyes. And though the village believed she had married beneath her, she could feel it quietly, unmistakably. She had married into a story far larger than anyone imagined. Kola rose before dawn every day. Not with the heaviness of a man burdened by poverty, but with the calm discipline of someone who understood time differently. While other farmers in the village dragged themselves out of sleep, groaning under the weight of labor, Kola moved with quiet precision, washed, dressed, and ready before the first rooster crowed. And yet, he never looked exhausted. Even after long days under the sun, even after nights spent awake during heavy rains, there was no strain in his eyes, no bitterness in his posture. He carried himself like a man who knew rest would always find him. At first, Abeni told herself it was nothing. Strength came in many forms. But then the visitors started coming. Not often enough to be obvious. Not rarely enough to be dismissed. Well-dressed men arrived in clean vehicles that did not belong in the village. They did not wander or ask for directions. They came directly to Kola's farm, parked at a respectful distance, and waited. They spoke to him privately. Never loudly. Never casually. Their tone was careful, measured. They did not sit unless he invited them to. They did not interrupt him. And when they left, they always nodded, slightly, respectfully, as if acknowledging someone far above them. Abeni watched from the doorway, confused, curious, uneasy. "These are people from the city," Kola explained simply one evening when she finally asked. "Old connections." He said no more. And she did not push. But then came the disappearances. Kola would prepare quietly, pack light, and tell her he would be gone for a few days. "Farm matters," he would say. Not defensive. Not evasive. Just final. Sometimes he returned with dirt beneath his nails, just as he had left. Other times his clothes were too clean. His boots barely worn. His voice steady in a way that suggested he had been far from fields and soil. Once, while cleaning the storeroom, Abeni noticed something that made her pause. Beneath old sacks of grain carefully hidden were documents. Thick paper. Official stamps. Language that did not belong to farming. She did not read them. She didn't need to. She knew. That night she asked him gently, not with accusation but with honesty. "Kola," she said, "there are parts of your life I don't understand." He looked at her for a long moment. Not startled. Not angry. Prepared. "There are things about me you don't yet know," he said calmly. "Not because I don't trust you, but because timing matters." He reached for her hand. "When the time comes," he added, "I will tell you myself." Something in his voice made her believe him. Outside their home, the village continued as it always had. Mockery. Whispers. Predictions of failure. She married poverty. She'll be back begging soon. Love doesn't feed a woman. Abeni heard it all. She endured it in silence. Then, something changed. Not suddenly. Not loudly. But unmistakably. The broken road near Kola's land was repaired. Smooth, wide, and well-drained. No official announcement. No government signboard. A new water borehole appeared near the market. Clean. Reliable. Free. Anonymous donor. The abandoned school building began to change. Walls repainted. Roof replaced. Desks delivered. Teachers rehired. Again, no name attached. The village praised the generosity. "God has remembered us," they said. "A good man must be among us." No one looked toward Kola, except Abeni. She watched her husband count seeds carefully before planting. Watched him speak softly to workers. Watched him refuse credit for anything. Watched him live simply even as invisible power flowed quietly through the land around him. And one evening, as the sun dipped low and the fields glowed gold, the realization settled in her chest, heavy and undeniable. Kola wasn't poor. He was hidden. And whatever he was protecting, whatever truth he was waiting to reveal, it was far bigger than the village ever imagined. The truth did not arrive gently. It arrived on a day the village nearly lost everything it had ever known. It began with unfamiliar vehicles, long, dark, polished, rolling onto ancestral land as if they had always belonged there. Men in pressed suits stepped out, shoes untouched by dust, eyes sharp with entitlement. They carried folders thick with documents and spoke with the cold certainty of people who believed the outcome had already been decided. They claimed ownership of the land. Not a portion. Not a section. All of it. They cited contracts no one remembered signing. Boundaries redrawn without consent. Deadlines that allowed no discussion. If the villagers did not vacate within weeks, legal action would begin immediately. Panic spread like wildfire. Elders gathered under the old meeting tree, voices raised, hands shaking. Some argued, some prayed, some blamed the past. Leaders who once spoke boldly now avoided eye contact, suddenly unsure of what authority meant when money and law stood against them. "This land is our inheritance," one elder cried. "We were born here," another whispered. "They cannot erase us." But fear does not listen to reason. By nightfall, despair had settled heavily over the village. That was when Kola stood up. Not dramatically, not loudly. He simply rose from where he sat. "I will handle this," he said. Silence followed. Then laughter. Not cruel, disbelieving. "What will a farmer do against lawyers?" Someone scoffed. "Sit down, Kola. This is not your fight." Kola did not argue. He did not explain. He only nodded once and walked away. That night, Abeni did not ask him questions. She had learned that when Kola grew quiet, something was already in motion. She watched him make a single phone call. Short, controlled, purposeful. The next morning, the village woke to a sight no one could explain. Black vehicles, more than before, lined the dusty road. But this time the men who stepped out were different. Lawyers in tailored suits. Government officials. Surveyors. Court officers. They did not demand. They consulted. Within hours, the company's representatives were pale. Their confidence dissolved into hurried whispers. Phones rang. Papers were reshuffled. Arguments were made. And immediately dismissed. By midday the announcement came. The company was withdrawing its claim. All documents nullified. All threats rescinded. All apologies issued. The village stood frozen. No one cheered. No one spoke. They simply stared. That evening, the elders summoned Kola. This time no one laughed. He stood before them calmly, hands relaxed at his sides, eyes steady. "I owe you the truth," he said. And for the first time Kola told his story. He was not just a farmer. He was the founder of one of the largest agricultural enterprises in the region, an empire that supplied food, resources, and logistics across cities and borders. Years ago, betrayal from within his own family had driven him away. Greed had poisoned what he built. Trust had been weaponized. So he left. He gave up the noise. Power. The constant hunger for more. He chose anonymity. He chose soil over boardrooms. Silence over applause. He had wealth. He had influence. But he wanted peace. The village sat in stunned silence. This was the man they had mocked. The man they had pitted. The man they had warned Abeni against. Abeni sat quietly beside him. Not shocked. Not angry. Not betrayed. Just thoughtful. Later that night, when the world had finally gone quiet, Kola spoke to her alone. "You would have married me even if I remained poor," he said softly. She nodded. "That's why I married you," she replied. And in that moment, the truth settled between them. Not as a weapon, not as a revelation meant to impress, but as confirmation of something far deeper. She had not married a secret. She had married a man. And the village would never see either of them the same way again. The village that once laughed at Abeni learned a new posture. They lowered their heads. The same voices that had mocked her choice now struggled to find the right words. Apologies came hesitantly at first. Half-spoken, uncertain, weighed down by shame. Then they came more freely. Elders sent messengers. Neighbors stopped her on the road. Friends who had once warned her away from poverty now praised her wisdom as if they had seen it all along. "You were brave," they said. "You saw what we could not. You chose well. Abeni listened. And then she moved on. She did not collect apologies like trophies. She did not allow praise to reshape her identity. The truth was simple. She had not chosen Kola to prove a point, and she would not live to enjoy being proven right. She remained unchanged. She greeted people the same way she always had. She worked alongside women in the fields. She fetched water when needed. She laughed softly, spoke thoughtfully, and refused to let sudden admiration harden her heart. She chose humility over pride, purpose over display, impact over applause. Together, Abeni and Kola began to transform the community, but not in the way people expected. There were no loud announcements, no grand ceremonies, no banners bearing their names. Instead, there were quiet changes. Farms flourished as modern techniques were introduced without stripping farmers of dignity. Seeds were shared, not sold with impossible interest. Tools appeared where hands had once worked bare. Training replaced dependency. Education improved. Classrooms were repaired. Teachers were paid on time. Children who had once memorized hunger learned to memorize possibility instead. Schoolyards filled with laughter where silence had once lived. Dignity returned. People were not rescued, they were empowered. And the village felt it. Not as charity, but as respect. And through it all, Abeni remained present. Not as a symbol, not as a wife standing behind power, but as a partner walking beside it. She listened. She advised. She questioned decisions when they risked pride instead of purpose. Kola welcomed it. Not as interference but as balance. Their partnership was not loud. It was solid. And love. Love deepened. Not the kind that burns brightly and fades quickly, but the kind that grows quietly through shared mornings, difficult choices, and mutual trust. Love that had survived uncertainty, ridicule, and simplicity long before wealth revealed itself. Because their bond had never been built on riches. It was built on respect, when respect was not rewarded. On patience, when patience cost comfort. On choosing a person, not their potential, not their possessions, but their principles. Abeni had married a poor farmer in the eyes of the world. But what she truly married was character. She married a man who understood restraint. A man who valued peace over applause. A man who knew that true power does not announce itself. It waits. And Kola. He had married a woman who saw him before the world did. A woman who chose integrity when status was offered. A woman whose love was not influenced by what could be gained, but by who stood beside her when nothing was promised. The village would tell the story for years, but they would never fully understand it. Because the greatest truths are often invisible to those who only look for wealth. Sometimes the richest hearts are hidden in the simplest lives. And sometimes, choosing love over status leads you to a destiny no wealth could ever buy. Choose character. Choose peace. Choose wisely. Because not all treasures glitter. And not all kings wear crowns. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video. Subscribe to this channel so you won't miss our next interesting story filled with love, lessons, and unforgettable moments. Until our next story.